Maybe.
Okay.
Ah, there we go.
There we are.
Sweet. It has. It's been a while. Andy, life has gotten a little.
Yeah, at least 3 weeks. I mean, it's we got a whopping 3 inches of snow here in Tupelo, and completely shut us down for a week. I'm not joking. And there was some ice involved with a little bit of snow, but no joke. We knew from the forecast that it was going to be here, and I figured we would be off a day or two. And then literally, I'm not joking, it was the entire next week. Saturday, Faye and I actually start digging out of our driveway with shovels and all that. After 4.5 hours, it was like, well, forget this. We'll start back up again tomorrow. And then Sunday, we start digging out again. It took another hour, and we finally was able to, our driveway is like a half a mile long, and it's up hills and all that. So it's great when it's not snowing, but man, it's terrible when, but we're just not set up for all that stuff here.
Right. So, for us, that's just an everyday thing, but that also interfered with my trip down there to see you. So that was a bummer.
Well, and see, I actually had to cancel a AF&I level 2. And until last year, I'd never had to cancel one of the seminars, and COVID hit, and then we had to cancel a couple of them. And then this year, snow. But hey, it's what it is, and we'll make it up.
What I want to do is I want to throw an X-ray up here.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Maybe I will.
Well, I'll give you an example while you're pulling that up.
Fire away.
I had a lady come in last week. She referred into by a nurse practitioner. The lady is 51 years old. Excruciating pain down the legs, back pain, kind of what she would consider a sciatica. And I'm like, well, it's actually not sciatica. It's because it just goes down to your knee. But the point is, she comes in, and nobody's been able to help this woman, and comes into the clinic on Wednesday, and Thursday she's already improving with her condition. So I'm looking at a knee here. So
we are.
This is not a happy person here.
Well, she wasn't a happy person. She's
right.
now a very happy person.
Yeah.
But I want to just kind of discuss what happens to get to a point where you're like this.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what happens is a lot of times our medical community is going to look at this particular individual, and they're only going to look at this picture because her knees hurt.
Right.
And the prescription's going to be drug it until you can't drug it anymore, inject steroids into it, you can't inject steroids anymore. Then when you can't sleep or you can't function, then we're going to replace those knees.
Mm-hmm.
You want to take a guess how old this individual was?
Since you put it that way, I will have to go, let's say, mid-50s.
Yep, you're right.
Okay. Anytime somebody asks me a question like, you're never going to guess old, so I know it's lower or more extreme than what but this looked like a 70 or, I mean, if you hadn't said that, I'd say, well, this is probably a 70 or an 80-year-old worn out knee here.
Right, so. Right. I'd put her at 80 just based on just this picture, but that wasn't the case. I will tell you just the short story here. We did inject her with stem cell derived biologics, and she did walk out of this clinic with about 50% of her pain reduced, and she's about 80% better from what she was, and that was 8 weeks ago that we injected these knees. Right. But let's talk about what's the standard American diet going to do for a joint like this?
Man, well, to start with, okay, we'll define what this standard American diet is, and that is fast food, processed food, eating stuff out of a bag or out of a box, and see what this does to a human being. If we can just realize that these are not even natural food products. I went down to the beach. This was, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I thought this was interesting. Because Faye was, and on the elevator, Faye was with me, and they said, don't feed the seagulls chips and bread. They are not their natural food products, and it will kill them.
Right.
And I told Faye, I said, we need to change seagulls to human beings.
Right.
And, because what happens, we end up eating things that are not natural to our body, processed food, fast food. And if we want to focus too on organic food, because see all this, I just saw a study yesterday where this herbicide and pesticide, this is actually causing Parkinson's. Okay. Right. So this inflammatory cascade and, leaky gut dysbiosis, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And if people don't understand what this is, it's because you don't go to a doctor who actually can comprehend what's going on, and they're just looking at the blinky light and saying, let's just work on this knee. And see, like with Brady and I, we're not just going to work on somebody's knee. We know this is the blinky light. Right. But how did a 55-year-old get to this point? And you start looking at their diet, and just getting someone on a anti-inflammatory diet is going to improve this person's function.
Right. So let's just talk about what the most inflammatory foods are. Number one is going to be sugar, and fake sugar, including high fructose corn syrup, including aspartame and all the stuff they make to make zero sugar sweet drinks. Omega-6 fatty acids, which is high. And yes, there's a link to that book in the description of this video. By the way. Yeah. So omega-6 fatty acids. So refined carbohydrates will drive up your blood sugar, cause inflammation. Meat that's cattle that's grain fed, they're high in omega-6s. Canola oil, vegetable oil, soy oil, which is the same thing as vegetable oil. All sorts of inflammatory oils that are used in fast food processes. In fact, it's getting to the point now, my Facebook feed is full of advertisements for class action lawsuits against Monsanto. Finally, because the pesticides, the Roundup that they're using on on all these products is disrupting people's gut function, and that's causing down the line cancer. So that's what that's all about. I think that you and I, Andy, are going to see in our lifetime class action lawsuits against the soda industry for all the crap that they're filling us full. But it is the standard American diet that drives up those inflammatory processes. It disrupts this lady's gut function. Because of that disrupted the gut function, she gained a bunch of weight. And because of that disrupted gut function, she is inflamed. So you take a joint like this that you see on the screen, you add 40 pounds to someone who shouldn't be 40 pounds heavier, and you get all this inflammation, and that's how you get a knee that looks like that, mid-50s.
Well, and again, I can't remember where I read this study, but I'm sure if you Googled it, it'd pop up. But if a human being is and what you were just talking about, 40 pounds. So let's add an excess of 40 pounds. Let's just use just a 200-pound person. Okay. So if we're walking, every time we hit the pavement, okay, just walking, the impact from that is 3 times our body weight. Okay. And now we start running, and well, I can't imagine somebody 40 pounds overweight running, but that's for another story. But that's 9 times your body weight. Okay. So see, you just add 40 pounds to this, and you're walking. Every time you hit the floor, you're adding 120 pounds to every impact that you're doing. And people that are listening, what I want them to understand is that this is not something that happened overnight. This is decades of deterioration. And it's the same way with cardiovascular disease. If somebody has a stroke, that stroke is just an end process of decades. And you start looking at this person's diet, and their diet is crap. They're not taking, and I don't mean this to sound the wrong way, but they're at some level, they are not taking responsibility for their life. And I hear people say, well, I just trust my doctor. Well, that was your first problem. Okay. Because, and with all due respect, medical doctors are great for end stage pathology.
Right.
Just like, we talked about that with cancer, those kind of, but what happens from the time you actually you become unhealthy to you're down here 15, 20, 30 years later to where you actually have enough tissue that's destructed that we can actually name a disease from that.
Right.
And, nobody wants to get to that level. So you got to take responsibility for your life. And people that are listening, you need to get on Brady's Facebook page for his recipes, and get off. If there were two things that, let's just go with the top three. Let's make it a trifecta. Okay. And Brady's already covered them. Number one, get off gluten. Number two, get off refined sugars. And then number three, get rid of milk. If you can do those three things, well, here's the deal. Do those three things and then do that for 3 months and call me up and tell me how bad your life is. Because if you seriously, right? I'm telling the truth, right? If you would make a commitment to do those three things, it would change your life. And then, get off again, artificial sweeteners is not that big of a deal. Just stop drinking sodas. That's a big area. Here's a clue. Take your body weight, divide it by 2, and that's how much water you need to consume a day. Because see, this with dehydration, it doesn't just affect your joints. It doesn't just affect your ligaments. This is going to affect your brain function. So your brain cannot function and your nervous system can't function at its peak level if you're dehydrated. And really, what I want patients to understand is there's just these basic concepts, just like building a house. If you follow these basic principles, it will change your life. But you can't go out here and go rogue on me and go to McDonald's. And I mean, my grandkid will tell you that you couldn't drag them into McDonald's. You couldn't force them to drink a soda. Because I'm telling you, you go by there and somebody would say, why don't you go to McDonald's? It's like, because that place will kill you. Right. And it's it's not like taking a gun and putting it to your head. It's like the death of 10,000 slices or whatever cuts. It's not even one cut or 1,000. This is a lifetime of destruction. And if I may drive this point home, and I use this a lot with my patients, I go, when you go to the grocery store, what I want you to do is I want you to look at mom and look at how big she is. Okay. Right. And I don't, people are like, well, you shouldn't call fat people fat. Okay, well, I'm bald-headed. You know what? And I don't get offended when people call me bald-headed. I got a gap. I've had that since the day I was born. And I've had 4 eyes since I was 15. So, so it's like we're too sensitive of a society today, and mom needs to lose weight. And then you look at little Junior in the little cart, he's drinking a Mountain Dew, eating Cheetos, and you're like, man, this kid doesn't have a chance. So at 2 years of age, he's already eating everything that's wrong. Right. And you give that 40 years or 50 years, and you see somebody with joint destruction like this, and then brain dysfunction and seizures. And
then we want to blame it on genetics.
Yeah. We need to get a seminar on that. So my sister chimed in. Genetics, and again, genetics, and there are people, and we all know this, that have genetic predisposition, but they are so minute. And I tell patients this all the time, that when a doctor tells you it's genetics without actually doing a test, that's just a cop out for him saying I'm too damn stupid to figure out what's wrong here. And, and it's right. I mean, because it's like, if it's just genetics, then, and there's nothing you can do about it, why are you seeing this doctor, and why just go home and die? I'm looking for fighters in my clinic. And if I took this camera and I put it out there, and you could probably do it because almost everybody's got a mask on, not everybody, but, and you can see how full our office is of people who are almost at the end of their rope, if you will, because they realize that I can't take enough drugs to solve this problem, because drugs are not going to solve this issue. I mean, drugs aren't going to fix it. If you're eating gluten and you've got small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and because you got brain trauma from when you were 14. These people came into my clinic last week, car wreck, hit the windshield, had to have reconstructive surgery on her face at 14. And now she can barely function in the clinic. And it's like, nobody's addressed her brain-based disorder. Nobody's addressed her vagal stimulation to her gut. Nobody's addressed her gut function. what they're doing is you got acid reflux, so we're going to give you Prilosec for that. Your gallbladder's not working, so we're going to cut that thing out. And then now you got small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and it's like, well, we don't have a clue what to do with that, but she's bloated big time. And so we have to actually take each part of that and dissect it. And so anyway, that's what we have to look at. And I try to get patients, and that's what they come in for. And one of the best things I ever did was write my book, and that is, we have to look at the whole body. And I mean, from brain to foot, we got to look at everything inside. Because I heard somebody the other day say the problem is with our healthcare system, it's become so specialized that nobody talks to everybody else. And,
right.
And for most people, and I actually got this from Brandon Brock and Dr. DeTeese, you don't need it. Most people, they don't need a specialist. They need a generalist. They need somebody that understands the body from head to toe and see a patient and go without any preconceived ideas and do an exam, do their metabolic testing. And if they need regenerative medicine, they need regenerative medicine. If they need, some liver help, some kidney help, some blood sugar help, inflammatory help, brain-based help. And see, when these people like this morning that I started up, I didn't have any preconceived. I didn't have a protocol that said, hey, this is what we're going to do with this person, because we have to go in and do an exam. And on that examination, their body and their neurology is going to tell us what the protocol is, where the breakdown is, and the metabolic care and all that. So, and, for anybody that's listening, if you said you tried everything, I can promise you hadn't. Because, you probably tried everything under the traditional realm. I'm not saying that, but guess what? I'll give you an example, and then I'm going to use this for healthcare. I was watching a video the other day, and this guy was like, man, I wore my COVID, I wore my N95 mask everywhere. If I woke up in the morning, I wore it. And he goes, and I still got COVID. What's up with that? And I'm like, dude, what's up with that is you bought into a false narrative is what's up with that. Okay. You bought into a false narrative that if you put a mask on, you're not going to get COVID, and he did. So here's the deal. You got people with chronic health problems, and you think medicine's going to help you, and you got a laundry bag full of drugs, and you're like, I've tried everything. What you've done is you bought into a false narrative.
Right.
Okay. And that false narrative is that medicine is going to be able to help you with all this. And if there's here's the deal. If that's so great, why is my office so busy? All right. Because every patient in my clinic is a medical failure. All right. And so again, these people have realized I've got to change the narrative in my life that I can't take more drugs to solve this problem because I'm already on, 8, 9, 10 drugs, and I'm worse than I ever was that I've ever been. So we got to change the narrative.
The narrative is that we're still calling it healthcare. It has nothing to do with that.
Oh, yeah. That's, again, that's the most BS thing. I mean, it's kind of like calling it healthcare. It's like me buying life insurance. It's like, well, it only works if you're dead. So, but it just sounds better if we called it life insurance instead of death insurance.
Yeah.
Let's call it health care, because disease care just doesn't have that little flair to it. So, but yeah, it's a disease care system, no doubt about it.
So my sister chimed in and said, preach, and she has every right to say that. Because she's been following these principles. She's lost 62 pounds. She looks amazing. And her knees won't look like this.
Yeah. And, I've got a gentleman here this morning. He came in for his maintenance care from knee pain, and his knees didn't look quite that bad. I mean, you could still see some space in there. And, he's in his mid 60s, and he came in, did our program, did regenerative medicine, went on our detox program, no gluten, no dairy, no sugar. And we put him on our gut detox. He went through the gut detox probably 3 or 4 times, but the guy, he ends up losing 110 pounds over a year, and his whole life is transformed.
Right.
And again, this is what I tell people all the time, man. It's like, look, you were created in the image of God. All right. You are a temple, and you're treating this thing like a nuclear waste dump.
Right.
Okay. I mean, and once you're gone, that's it. We can't bring you back. And why don't we focus on, instead of quote, just getting by, why don't we focus on living life to our fullest? Why don't we optimize our life instead of the just get by? And, and people who come to see me have bought into the, I want to make something out of my life. And I've used this guy before. He came into the clinic at 91. His knees probably look like this. Goes to Memphis to the medical doctor, and they go, "Well, you're 91. You're too old to fool with." And this guy actually gives me a testimonial, so I'm just quoting him. "No, you're too old to fool with." Comes down here. The guy's 94 years old now. Okay, he's got a girlfriend. Go figure. And and he even told me 9 months ago, he goes, "Dr. Barlow, I don't even know why I'm still coming in here. I feel so good." And I'm like, "Brother, you're 94 years old. And the reason that you keep coming in here is because you want to continue to feel good." And, and most people, would never imagine the most expensive car that's out there. I don't know what they are. I mean, Lamborghini or Ferrari, but I know there's Bentleys that are probably $1 million. But see, none of that, even that Bentley, is if you destroy it, you can still go buy another one if you have the money. Right. And then once you destroy nobody can go get another one of you. And that's what I want people to understand is you treat your car and your lawnmower better than you do your own body. And so, we need to look at ourselves like it's a temple. God created you, God made you, and it's, and instead of treating it like a junk heap, why don't we start treating our body like a temple that it deserves to be treated as? And that means getting off gluten, getting off milk, getting off refined sugars, getting off artificial sweeteners, and just, if it's in a bag, stop eating it. So those are just some simple, those are just some simple concepts that if you follow, and again, anybody listening, do that for 3 months and call me back and tell me how terrible your life is. That's a big Barlow challenge. That's what we call it. Back in the 80s, they had the Nestea challenge, so you can take the Barlow challenge. So
that's awesome. All right, Andy, I think we need to start wrapping it up here. I know I've got time going off, and
all right,
okay. Thank you. It's great to see you.
Good to see you again, and I'm glad we kind of got back in the game and got rolling again with this after taking probably 3 or 4 weeks off, but
it was too long.
All right, man. Good to see you, Brady.
Stay put for just a second as I end this. Okay.
Okay.